Hi, everyone. I'm John Lux. I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention that a lot of our friends, families, and colleagues are still dealing with the aftermath and challenges from Hurricane Milton. So, of course, our thoughts and well wishes continue to go out to everybody that was impacted. As I mentioned before we got on here, I know we had a number of people reach out and say they wanted to participate, but they weren't sure of their internet. So, as always, the video will be posted later next week and people will be able to catch up. But for those that are here, welcome to Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, and relationship building in Florida's screen production industry. Today, we have a discussion with some tremendous Hispanic leaders and content creators in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. In a moment, our panelists will introduce themselves, and then we'll ask some questions. During that time, we're going to ask everybody to keep their microphones on mute to avoid any background noise. After we've gotten through initial questions, we'll open it up to the audience for question and conversation, as we always do. At that time, please use the hand-raising function that's under the reaction button in Zoom so we can call on you. We're going to ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of the fairness to others that want an opportunity. As always, Film Florida Fridays are free to attend, but we hope you'll consider donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. That donation link will be posted in our chat box and is always up on our website as well. So with that, let's start with introductions. Eddy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you so much first to John and Sandy for inviting me to be here. It means a lot to me. I think moments like this are important. I think the sharing of knowledge is what makes all of us kind of elevate our work and get to a place where we want to get to. We've always been, me as in my nonprofit, have always been proponents of not gatekeeping the information that we hold and allowing other people to learn from what we've learned. So I am a filmmaker in Miami, Florida. I am of Caribbean descent. My parents are Cuban and Dominican. I started my career as an editor for Nickelodeon and MTV. I would edit children's television. I would edit on Dora the Explorer and Max and Ruby. And after 2 or 3 years, I got frustrated with the fact that I was making movies for other people, but wasn't making any for myself. So I got together with a group of friends and we kind of came up with this idea of how do we help ourselves when no one else wants to help us. And we started a nonprofit. The nonprofit's called the White Elephant Group, and it focuses on 2 things: creating films and creating communities. So the idea is we put on networking events and we share our knowledge of other filmmakers through panels. We have a panel next week with the Miami Film Festival. And then we also make films ourselves and commission films from our community. Over the last 4 years, we've commissioned almost $250,000 in short films in South Florida, and we're commissioning more this year. We also put on major events with industry leaders, and we also make feature films and short films. Next week, we're actually starting production on our second feature film. All of our feature films are also financed here locally with South Florida funds. So that is me in a nutshell.
Excellent. And we love the fact that White Elephant Group is a member of Film Florida. We're very proud of that. Bill, you're up next.
Yeah, well, I'm an actual Floridian, born and raised in South Florida. My parents are Cuban, so I was running around Miami Springs, which I attended Miami Springs Senior High, and I have family that still live in South Florida. I was unfortunately part of that mass exodus that happened once we lost the incentive. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I started as a video journalist in local news at, Channel 4 and Channel 10. Then went to work for the networks. I moved to directing and producing reality shows, music videos, commercials, documentaries, feature films, television series. Then came out west after the exodus and became the Senior Vice President of Development and Production for Rebel Way Entertainment. And presently, I'm the CEO of Playworld Pictures for the last 8 years. I've also been a member of the Producers Guild. So that gives you an overall. I started as a DP and ended up as a producer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And JL, you're up.
Awesome. Just drank a shot of coffee, so now I'm ready to go. JL Martinez. I am the co-founder, creative director of the Miami Media Film Market, which started 15 years ago with my amazing business partner in that, Patty Arias, who's also the executive director of Comic Gold. Unfortunately, she was wrapping up some grants. She was going to try to listen in, but it's the fiscal year for those in government that know about that stuff, and dealing with that fun stuff. But yeah, I'm also an independent producer, born and raised in Miami, neighbors with Bill Garcia in Hialeah, Florida, just across the bridge. I am of Cuban and Puerto Rican descent. Went to public school, Hialeah High, was a graduate of the film school at the University of Miami. So I'm a Cane. And shortly after that, I started to work in the talent agency business. First at a boutique agency in Miami Beach, representing models and actors for everything from films, music videos, and commercials, to a bunch of other weird stuff that producers would throw our way. And eventually found myself in Los Angeles for about 4 or 5 years, where I worked in motion picture production at what was then called ICM, then ICM Partners, now TAA. Which was one of the big 3 agencies in Los Angeles. Decided that I wanted to tell Florida, specifically Miami, stories. So I moved back to my hometown and have been there ever since, And so between the Miami media and film market and trying to develop the local industry and create international partnerships with folks in the UK and Spain and Latin America, as well as, of course, LA and New York, and really trying to shine a light on the local industry, as well as developing and producing my own work.
Excellent. And of course, MMFM is also a member of Film Florida, which we are very proud of and happy to have that as well. Eddy, you mentioned White Elephant Group. So you talked a little bit about it. Tell everybody a little bit more of who you guys are, what you do, and mention some of the projects that some of the people might recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been a nonprofit for 11 years now. The idea being that the local industry here, kind of like JL said, is active, but it needs support. And I think when we were first young filmmakers 11 years ago, we didn't find the kind of industry support that we wanted. So we decided, what if we became the industry support that we needed when we started off? So what we did is we found ways to bring in funds to our nonprofit and then use those funds to support local filmmakers in South Florida by commissioning their films, or by just helping them. When we first started, we didn't have money to give to filmmakers. So what we had was some equipment, some free crew, some catering connections, some location connections. But now over the last 11 years, we've built this thing where we're making feature films. We're on our second feature film right now. We're working with a famous Cuban comedian, Ruben Rabasa, who has a tremendous career in Miami. Yeah, people like him. He's hilarious. He's so funny. We can't stop laughing when we're on set with him. So he's the lead on our feature film that we're shooting next week. It's about a man whose lover gets sucked into a taxidermy parrot. So it's a dark Cuban comedy. We also put on networking events every other month. We do networking events in the community, and we bring people together. And that has led to a lot of collaboration with people that normally wouldn't have collaborated. So many times people tell me, like, I don't know any other filmmakers, but when you come to events like that, you meet someone else and you create some kind of partnership and you make movies together. And the last thing that I'll say, that WEG, White Elephant Group, we say WEG for short, that WEG really does well is making films about South Florida, about Latin and Hispanic experiences, and taking those around the world. So our films, like Compa last year, is a short film that we commissioned, went on to play Tribeca, to play Holly Short's Black Star in New Orleans, and it won the top prize at the Miami Film Festival. We've also had films that we've made that have gone on to play in Tokyo, in Amsterdam, in London, in Toronto. So we've taken our films around the world, and they've all been Latin-centric films, which is a beautiful thing to see. There was one little anecdote that I'll add is we made a short film about my best friend's mom, his Dominican mom. And that film played in Tokyo. And when it played in Tokyo, she watched the live stream of it on the computer and she was in tears. And we asked her, like, why are you in tears? And she's like, I never thought people would care about this random Caribbean woman on the other side of the planet. So I think for us, filmmaking is more than just a career, more than just fun. It's like a cultural binding experience that we're trying to share with the whole world.
Excellent, excellent. Now, JL, you mentioned MMFM when you did your intro. Expand a little bit more. Where did the organization start? What are kind of the initiatives? Talk about the evolution of the organization.
Yeah, so the evolution was simple. So Patty brought me this idea that, her day job as the executive director of Camacol, which is the largest Hispanic chamber in the state of Florida, had a very interesting model for connecting local businesses with international, right? You know, like a lot of chambers do. But they had found a way to work with that, particularly through their Hemispheric Congress, which brought together all the heads of chambers from the Latin America, the Caribbean, and Spain in Miami, which is known as the Ibero-American region, right? And so I think the idea for Patty, whose father was a producer, and you know she was also an actress and a production person back in the early days of Que Pasa USA, if you guys remember that show, always had a passion for the industry and said, why don't we apply some of those similar models to film and entertainment? Treat it like a business, like an export import, like any other business, and let's see if we can bring the right people together and really help support the local industry by creating these partnerships, right? And so it started very small, as actually a small event next to the Hemispheric Congress, but it's grown over the last 15 years into our own standalone event. We've had great partnerships over the years, particularly with our international partners in the UK and Madrid, which, as Eddy was mentioning, you know, not really knowing at the time how much global appeal there were even for Miami stories, because even though we're telling local stories, they have this universal appeal. And at the end of the day, you know, our culture is different. It's unique. Miami is a brand. Florida is a brand. It's, you know, I'll say it's sexy. It's fun. People want to be a part of it from all over the world. So we have that huge attraction that, you know, we want to use storytelling, obviously, as a vehicle to get that across, you know, both from a creative and a passion standpoint, but also so that it makes business sense, right? Because we all want to work and make money and pay the bills, which get higher every year, right? and make it all work on all fronts. So that's essentially what we've been doing. Everything from, you know, our master classes and workshops to co-production pitches that have been very successful over the last few years. Now we've expanded into training young animators in Miami to get into digital media as well. And that started as a pilot program and is starting to grow now very well. And so all those things just to really give a voice and professional opportunities to the local industry.
Very good. And Bill, you talked a little bit about starting in news sports documentaries where you received 2 Emmys for outstanding regional news reporting. Talk a little bit about how some of that early stuff has now shaped you in this part of your career in producing.
Yeah, I started in the news department at WTVJ with, for those Floridians, with Ralph Reddick. So it goes way back. And then I switched over to WPLG with Dwight Lauderdale and, you know, Ann Bishop. So that, being a journalist in South Florida, especially during the 80s and 90s, I was right there as a storyteller, as a cameraman. So I was involved in the everyday life, whether it was something bad, you know, a Coke deal gone bad, you know, or positive stories of the community coming together and being forthright with each other and helping each other, and how that helped me. And this everything, even in sports, because I worked on the Don Shula show, Jimmy Cephalo and Sports Jam Live. That all gave me the experience, the personal experience as a documentary cameraman. And that crossed over to all my producing, because what happens is I've seen it. I've seen what an actual drug bust looks like. I've seen what a positive story can tell. And those experiences have always crossed over to a lot of my content. And it's also gauged opportunities, because I was hired as a consultant for Birdcage, for example. So that also provided some opportunities with my news experience. And it's just something that I truly value, because as a news guy, you also have to edit to tell the story. And a lot of times you're producing and shooting and editing, and that kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea of what a story should actually say, you know. And then the first project series that I won an actual Emmy was Hot Shots, which was about the fashion industry exploding in South Florida. And that was all told through back interviews and visuals. So that's something that I've definitely think it's positive as a producer to have that type of experience under my belt.
Well, I think it goes to the notion of, don't be discouraged if you may have a goal, but if you're not fulfilling that goal early on, that doesn't mean that it's a waste. That just means it's a stepping stone, hopefully, to get to where the goal is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then more importantly, though, it comes to truth of the story. I've had a lot of arguments with other producers and writers when I read something and I'm like, that's not what happens. And I want for the story to be authentic as much as possible. We still have to entertain. I believe entertainment and education and inspiration is the type of stories that I want to tell. But at the same time, we got to do the horror movie to pay the bills that really don't have much to say. But going back to the journalism and working even on the networks, and for example, I'll tell you a quick story. I was actually selected to represent the US in a Soviet American exchange program during Perestroika.
Wow.
I mean, that's a hell of a life. You know what I'm saying? To review and see different cultures, embedded with the Maiki Indians in Guatemala. I mean, those are things that I cherish in my life, and I've taken those life stories, those life lessons as a journalist into my work as much as I can.
Yeah, great lessons, great lessons. Eddy, you also, all of you at WEG work really closely with After School Film Institute, ASFI, which is another great member of Film Florida. And you have, teaching experience with your alma mater at FIU. What's it been like to kind of shape the next generation of storytellers?
Before I answer the question, I just want to shout out Sandy Leiterman, who is the reason that the After School Film Institute even existed. If it wasn't for her, it would not. It's an amazing nonprofit. It's an amazing organization. For those who don't know, we go to underserved communities and we teach life skills through filmmaking. So some of the poorest communities in South Florida, we bring filmmakers that are not only like locally recognized, but also nationally recognized. We brought the writer of Moonlight down to speak to a class. We have filmmakers that have directed $1 million features come speak to 12-year-old kids. And then we teach these kids how to make their own films. And what's crazy is we've been doing it for almost a decade now. And some of the kids that I taught when they were in middle school are now college graduates, and they're working on film sets with us professionally. And sometimes getting paid the same amount of money that I'm getting paid, which is crazy to think that they grew up and now they're my colleague. But it's important to me, especially because I had really bad teachers growing up in my film career. I just didn't have film mentors growing up. I just didn't have great ones. So I wanted to be that kind of great film mentor to the kids in a way that I didn't have, because I think that the only way to become good at something is to have someone who's already failed teach you how they failed, or to fail yourself. And the first one's a lot easier than the last one. So we try to do that. And then I still teach nowadays at the Florida International University and the New York Film Academy on South Beach. So it's an amazing experience to teach these filmmakers, because it reminds me why I love what I do. Some days I get frustrated at all the spreadsheets and all this nonsense of legal mumbo jumbo. But then I go into a film class where my first semester students are carrying a camera and just shooting anything. And I'm like, wow, I used to be like that. It reminds me why I love what I do again.
Yeah, that's a great example of why it's important to do those things. You're absolutely right. It definitely kind of reinvigorates. Yeah. JL,
I wanted to say something really quick about mentors.
Please.
That is the most important thing that a filmmaker can have.
The most important thing, 100%.
And I remember all my mentors, all the way back to news. Al DeRuthi would come to me, and my mentors were all those cameramen at Channel 10, because they were here. And it was a competition within each other. But all of a sudden, Al going to me and saying, oh, here comes Fellini. I saw that as a positive. As a producer, David Ornstein, I mean, he's shooting some amazing feature films. And when I have a question, I call my mentors. So something to that, it's very, very important that filmmakers that find success have always been able to find a mentor that they have during their entire lifespan.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. And I think that you're never too old for a mentor either, because a mentor is just someone who's done something longer than you have. And that always exists. There have been problems that I've had that have taken me 2 years to solve. And then I meet someone who's like, oh, you could have just asked me. This is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, if I would have just asked you 2 years ago, I would have saved myself all this time. So if you can find a mentor, and you'd be surprised how many people are willing to mentor someone. If you just email them, call them, be like, hey, you might not know me. I'm this person. Can you just talk to me for a bit? And you just create this really natural relationship that then builds and builds and builds, and you trust each other. I think what stuff like JL does with the media market is a great opportunity to meet people who can then become your mentors too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. JL, I want to jump over to you to talk a little bit about your company, Lucky 17 Entertainment, where you've produced a number of projects. But I want you to highlight Marcus. Tell everybody who's not familiar with it what the project is, what the film was about, and then talk about the kind of the journey you took it on with the festivals.
Absolutely. So Marcus, or as we call her in Hialeah, Marku, started off as a short film that was written and developed by a very good longtime friend and colleague, J.R. Poli, who essentially wrote the film in one night based on a personal experience of his having to do with mental health issues that he was going through. And he was able to express that in this beautiful 10-minute short film that we literally shot over a weekend. Going back to Eddie's point about, sometimes you don't always have money, but if you have resources, you can get stuff done, right? So JR had been a longtime commercial director. So a lot of the crew and friends and acquaintances he made along the way were willing to donate their time, their money, but primarily their equipment and just their on-set experience. And that's how we were able to get it done so quickly. Went on an amazing festival run. We were very lucky. We wanted to open in Miami, but we were a little late when we finished production in the late fall that year. So we went all around the world and then ended up doing our last festival in Miami. And by then, throughout this festival run, everyone was like, man, I want to know more about this story. Is there a continuation? Is there a way that you guys can expand it? So, of course, JR, also very quickly wrote the feature version of Marcus. And so what we did was, going back to, why festivals are so important, not just as a showcase of your work and your talent, but as a marketing tool for your future work, is that we basically use the opportunity of being at the Miami Film Festival and being nominated for the Made in Mia Award to launch an Seed and Spark campaign for the feature version. And so generated a lot of momentum and was able to get the feature funded at a micro budget level. But literally a month after the Miami Film Festival wrapped, we went into production on the feature version and shot it over the summer, mostly in Miami, a little bit in Broward. So shout out to Sandy as well. And a lot of it in Hialeah, where again, I'm from, and again, going back to relationships, getting able to get a lot of locations and things for free or at a very low cost, because we just knew the people there. Me and JR were both Hialeah boys, and we just, we spoke Spanish and all that stuff, and we were able to negotiate amazing deals to get a huge amount of quality for a very little price, which is obviously the name of the game where you're producing an indie feature, especially at the micro level. And so in that case, we were able to then premiere the feature at the next Miami Film Festival. Unfortunately, that was a double-edged sword because that was March of 2020. Which we remember that unfortunately month and year where our worlds ended simultaneously. And it was crazy because luckily we were premiering the opening weekend of the festival. And I remember, I think we were at a cocktail party with Jay LaPlante on the Wednesday after. And it's like, did you hear that, South by Southwest just got canceled and this other festival? And he was like, well, at least we're going to finish ours. And the next day the college calls and says, send everybody home. Literally 5 days into the 10, like filmmakers whose flights were canceled, other filmmakers that had just landed on the plane that had to go back home. It was just a mess. So we had this amazing plan in our heads about launching in Miami, then going to all these other festivals, getting this great distribution deal, mainly theatrical, and then all of that just died. But, obviously, silver linings, right? We were able to do a lot of virtual festivals. We were able to talk to a lot of people remotely, which in the end also saved us money, right? Because you don't have to travel to all these festivals, right? Now everything was virtual and online and streaming stuff and doing Q&As like this on Zoom. And we were able to help, build on that momentum that we thought we had lost. And it took a couple years, but we finally found a great distributor, Gravity, which did a great job with the film. Ended up getting some theatrical limited US and internationally as well, and ended up getting like a 2-year deal to stream it on Stars Network, wow, where it played. And so it was like literally a 95% local cast and crew, a lot of unknowns, but local talent. The biggest talent was Paul White, known as the Big Show from his wrestling days, which again was a random favor because he was living in Coral Gables at the time. And JR had shot a PSA for the Miami Heat's fundraising event, that karaoke thing that they do. And we ended up just going to the party and hanging out with John, who was performing that night. So Paul White was doing his song. We chatted with him after in the VIP area. And then I guess what closed the deal is I had to go up and do a rap song at the end of the night. Embarrassed myself, but we got the Big Show on board.
That's worth it.
Doing some Sir Mix-a-Lot, which was kind of fun.
There you go.
So that was the journey of Marcus, essentially.
Well,
that's the side of filmmaking you will never see. People never see the rap karaoke
yes.
part of filmmaking.
Yes.
Right.
It's all
That's
relationships and doing crazy things to get it done.
That's right. Well, in a little bit at the same time of that, you were involved with a film called Critical Thinking, which starred and directed by John Leguizamo. For those that aren't familiar with that film, tell us a little bit about that experience and truly telling another authentic Miami story.
Yeah, so that was interesting because kind of like Marcus came like right after, but just before. At that time, I was consulting with, if you guys are familiar with the Hialeah Park Racetrack, which is an amazing venue, historic venue in the heart of Hialeah, which is 200 acres. And at the time, the idea was that they were looking to bring more productions into the park. Famously, they had shot The Godfather Part 2, a couple scenes there, and a bunch of other amazing films. But then they had kind of lost sight of that. The new owner, because his father unfortunately passed away and he took over, but it's always been a family business since the 1970s, the Bernetti family. And so he wanted to bring part of that business back and give it an allure. So we took advantage of that and started to put together some films and music videos. And then we were approached by one of the producers of Critical Thinking to see if we could put together a deal to shoot it there, because the story, if you guys are not familiar with Critical Thinking, is based on a true story of the, I think it's the 1998 Miami Jackson High chess team, which was, a bunch of inner city kids, Latino kids, Black kids, who the coach, Mario Martinez, in order to get them off the streets, essentially, taught them the game of chess and started to take them on all these competitions where they were competing against like the top Ivy League prep schools in the country, to the point that they actually won the national championship. In 1998. So Carla Berkowitz, who found this story in a news article and optioned it literally like the year after, had spent the last 20 years trying to get this movie made, essentially. And so coincidentally, she came across the executive producer of another film from Chicago that basically kind of opened the door to getting an introduction to John Leguizamo, who at the time, obviously a huge Hispanic actor, had worked in Miami before, but wanted to direct. So this producer, and the film was Home Alone, was able to introduce John to Carla, and they teamed up to produce this film, which was shot on a very low budget, but told this amazing Miami story. And we were able to do a deal because Jackson High had just gotten this huge facelift. They needed a high school that still looked like the 90s. Hialeah Senior High School was built in the 1950s and hadn't gotten that upgrade. The facade still very much looked like the 50s and 60s when it was first built. So we created this base camp at Hialeah Park where we were able to shoot 3 scenes in one day there, as well as all the high school scenes at Hialeah Senior High, which was like literally 2 blocks down the road. So again, just kind of using the ingenuity of the indie producer to make a dollar holler, as we like to say. but ended up telling this beautiful, authentic story that John not only starred in as Mario Martinez, but also directed his directorial debut. And the film did very well. Unfortunately, again, another film that was supposed to premiere at South by the week after Marcus. So we had two huge premieres back to back that unfortunately didn't go as planned. But eventually that film got picked up by Netflix and is still on there right now. So if you guys haven't seen it, definitely check it out. But it was a beautiful experience that told a really authentic Miami story. And this Cuban teacher, Mario Martinez, who did an amazing job with those kids back in the 90s.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the film, I definitely highly recommend finding it on Netflix. Bill, I want to jump over to you. We've talked about, you've worked in feature films, television program. You worked with some really great people: Paul McCartney, Lenny Kravitz, Michael Jackson, Shakira. Do you have any favorite behind the scenes, stories from any of your projects? Any of those, or something else that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, first of all, South Florida has always been a mecca for music. That's very important for a lot of people to not forget. It's not just the 305 sound. So a lot of these artists, for example, Paul McCartney, which was amazing, his rehearsal studios was the old Jackie Gleason, studio, which is in South Beach. So it's amazing when you're working with artists of that caliber and they're like, gentlemen, put your cameras down. I don't want any filming going on. Sit down and relax. And he plays an entire set.
Wow.
And Kevin Lane's hanging out. Kevin Lane's also a Miami filmmaker. And we have that ability sometimes of sharing that with these amazing musicians when it comes to music and video. Same thing with, like, for example, Lenny Kravitz. I worked with him during his entire Dig In album. And those are moments where you're hanging out in the studio and you're just chilling and just talking and just getting to know who the artist is. But I think the most embarrassing moment for me is I'm a huge Shakira fan. And after I finish working with her, what I don't do is I don't like to take photos with some of the artists, even though I've taken a photo with Steven Spielberg. That's another story, which was up in Universal Studios. But with Shakira, I usually get like their CDs, because we're old school, right? Remember, this is like CD time. So I wanted her to sign, the CD cover, because that's what I usually do. I have a whole wall with like all these CD covers signed by artists. And I was a little nervous with my Sharpie and I accidentally dropped it and we both bent down and banged our heads at each other. Yeah. And she's like, "Oh, Chichong." And it was like, oh my God, that was pretty embarrassing, but we laughed about it and stuff. So yeah, that's an interesting story. As it pertains now to stories of feature films that was difficult, it was really Rally Caps. Rally Caps was shot during the end of the pandemic, and not like Florida, because you had a governor that pretty much said, it's open, go ahead and film and shoot. But Rally Caps was actually filmed in New York and in Los Angeles. And we had to deal with all these COVID restrictions, which, I mean, think about it. I had a total of about 50 kids, 50 parents stuck in a summer camp facility where I had to create a bubble. So that to me was the most challenging production that I've ever been involved in, was Rally Caps. But for me, the music, going back to South Florida, it's wonderful. It really is.
Yeah. Eddy, you talked about how your work is inspired by the Hispanic multiculturalism in Miami. Share a little bit more about how your work in creative producing and post-production emulates this.
Yeah. So I remember once when I was young, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was like 10 or 11 years old. I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. I'm 35 now, and I've been doing it ever since I decided I was going to do it. At one point when I was like 16 or 17, I heard that word, like Hispanic multiculturalism. And I was like, oh, that's what I am. Like, that defines my genre of filmmaking. Miami is this weird hodgepodge of a city where it's very Latino, but Latino in a mixed way, right? In a Latino in a way that no other city is Latino. Because here you're going to find Panamanians, Nicaraguans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Cubans, Colombians, Venezuelans, Argentinians, in one place. And each of their experiences is so different. Like those Latinos are not a monolith. They all have different cultures.
Right.
So when I started doing producing work, what I wanted to do was I wanted the filmmakers that I worked with and I produced their work for to not be embarrassed of their roots, right? My family is like loud Cubans, loud Dominicans, and they're not embarrassed of who they are. So I wanted to bring that same sense of pride to the work that I did as a filmmaker. So a lot of what I do is work with writers or directors that have ideas, and I embrace those ideas and I let them come out and I help them explore those ideas. And also when it comes to post-production, like I said, I started working in post right after film school, editing Dora the Explorer. And I thought I was going to be a cinematographer. You know, I left film school and I was like, I'm going to be a DP. And someone pulled me aside once and was like, listen, there's no cinematography work, but there's a lot of editing work. And I needed work. So I just started editing and I never stopped. But then I got into creative producing because I got sick of editing so much. So now I creative produce most of the time. That kind of really Latin heavy work.
Yeah. I want to jump ahead in our questions because I want to ask one of the questions that we have for all of you. So whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead and take this. But why, we're doing this as part of Hispanic Heritage Month. And why is it so important for all of you to teach or to tell authentic stories, whether it be, the location or whether it be cultural? Why is it so important for the authenticity of it?
I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I think because the best stories are personal stories, right? And again, the skill of the artistry behind doing it well is that you can take that personal story and make it universal, right? That's the gift that certain writers and directors and creative producers have. But really, it's what drives you because this is such a difficult business, right? In general, that if you're not passionate about the story you're telling, if it doesn't represent you, if it doesn't hit you in your core, and for those of us that grew up with Hispanic culture, especially in Miami, Eddy say it has such a unique vibe. And it's something that really becomes a part of your being, your essence, as a person. And you take it with you wherever you go in the world, essentially, and you want to showcase that. And these are stories that I think deserve to be told and that have a place, not only creatively, but in the marketplace of ideas out there. That these stories can really shine a light so much on what we do specifically and our unique culture and our unique way of doing things and interacting with the world. That I think is just, it's something that just drives you to make things happen. That's what I think.
And also, what drives me is when I get tired of Latinos being written only as drug dealers and gangsters. I mean, Cocaine Hotel, Griselda, Narcos. I mean, we're much more than just that. I mean, all of a sudden, you say, oh, here comes the Cuban. And all of a sudden you're kind of like thinking, oh, shoot, what is he up to? So for me as a filmmaker, and it's extremely difficult, especially in Hollywood. It's like, hey, I got this great romantic comedy, The Wedding Photographer. It's about a Cuban American, who's a wedding photographer looking for love. It's all of a sudden, it's kind of like, I just, for example, purchased the story rights for The Maids of Havana, which is the story of those maids that were left behind during the Cuban Revolution. Again, a small book. I acquired the rights and trying to get it made. And those personal story, just like, Jael was saying, it's important, but there's a huge challenge to tell those stories unless you're willing to, oh, I got another cocaine hotel. Oh, I got another drug dealer. Oh, I got another detective, killing kind of thing when it comes to Latino stories. So for me, as it pertains to Latino stories, and I've worked on Quien Paga la Cuenta, which is an Honduran film. Mi Verano con Amanda Tres, a romantic comedy out of Puerto Rico, and then Amor en Frijoles, again, simple stories about Latin culture. also filmed in Honduras. Those stories are for me important because I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're not just, criminals and cocaine and drugs and shooting people, that
Yeah.
we're other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to take what Bill said and run with it a little bit and not try to be so sad or political, but media dictates so much of how people see the world.
Yeah.
And there's people in middle America who have never met someone of Latin heritage at all. So their only understanding of what a Latin person is on TV. So that representation is important because it's going to shape how people see us. There's a lot of xenophobia. There's a lot of hatred spewed towards Latin people in today's culture. And I think if we saw more genuine, nice Latinos on TV, the population would be like, oh, Latinos are genuine, nice, fun people. I think that's an important part that we play. But besides the social aspect of it, I think there's also an economic aspect of it about telling authentic Latin stories. And that is, I was reading the statistic on Hollywood Reporter that Latinos make up 30% of ticket sales in the box office, right? They're one of the biggest consumers of media in the United States. So by not having authentic stories, you're not only losing out on the social impact of it, but you're losing out on money. There was a study that said that you're losing out on $12 billion to $18 billion a year by not having more Latino stories. So people in the industry are like, oh, there's no money in Hollywood. The movies aren't making money. You have $18 billion you're leaving on the table by not making these stories. Why would you do that? And then when it comes to representation, only 5% of lead roles are Latino, when Latinos make up a fifth of the US population, 20%. So what Bill is saying is absolutely accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, all great points. Go ahead, Bill.
And to jump in, and I'm talking specifically Hollywood because what they finance.
100%. Yes.
The challenge for Cubanos, Puerto Ricans, Venezuelans is that Hollywood perceives Latinos in Mexico and Mexican.
Yeah.
So it becomes even more of a challenge to bring in Caribbean, because I consider myself a Caribbean, because that's where I come from, right? To tell those Caribbean stories into the Hollywood system. I pitched Netflix Mexico, The Maids of Havana. And their response was pretty much, well, it's not really a Mexican story. And that's also a challenge for us Caribbean, influence Latinos in the community, that Hollywood, they're kind of like, well, Mexicans make X amount of, whatever it is, 60% or something like that. It's a huge number of the Latinos there. And I understand that, but that's also the challenge for us Caribbean filmmakers,
Yeah. I flew to London last year or earlier this year with my wife. We were screening a movie out there. And then all these British people afterwards came up to us and they're like, we didn't even know what the Caribbean was until we saw this movie. And I was like, what do you mean? But it's so underrepresented in media, especially on that side of the world, that the Caribbean just doesn't exist. It's just Mexico.
Yeah.
Those are great points. And I think that is the biggest challenge that you guys were mentioning, is because it's not a homogenous group, right? Even though, like you said, collectively it represents 30% of ticket sales. How do you find the universality and bring that group together cohesively when we also, especially for us who are first generation, right, that grew up in the United States consuming a lot of American or general market content, right? And we like the Fast and the Furious as much as Que Pasa USA or whatever. And how do you find that and it's hard to do. I thought maybe Robert Rodriguez did a great job with Spy Kids, right? Which was a very genre universal story, but the family was Mexican, just happened to be Mexican. And he made that work. And I think finding maybe those kind of stories that have a very kind of general mass market appeal, but within the context of a specific culture and a place, might give us the best shot.
Yeah. I mean, it always like right now, obviously we're in an election cycle. It always cracks me up when I see like them referred to as Hispanics or Latinos vote this way, and I'm like, well, which section of
Right.
that? Because there's so many, and yeah, it always cracks me up. It's like, okay, yeah, you're clearly very white there. Um, so okay, I got a couple more questions, but if anybody wants to ask any questions, if you hit the react button, at least on my Zoom, that's what it is. If you hit the react button, then you can raise your hand, and that way we know if you have a question. But let's just do a quick little round robin, just like we did on that one. Advice for people that want to, follow in what you guys are doing, whether it be Bill, in what you're doing, or JL or Eddy on the kind of independent side of things. Advice for people that are trying to match your success. Bill, why don't you go first?
It's networking. For example, I know Sandy's going to be embarrassed, but I've known Sandy for so long. She is the most amazing. She's blushing. I'm sorry, Sandy, but it's true. It's like I've known you for my entire career and we've kept touch. The most important thing that a filmmaker can do to continue to work and live in any environment, and the environment right now is extremely volatile. The industry it's changing. It's kind of redeveloping. It's kind of rechanging. You got Paramount cutting back. You have all this. So the most important thing is networking. And I'll give you a perfect example. One of my cameramen and vendors, when I was producing down in South Florida, owns now a company, and he's calling me for help. That's networking, a relationship of over 20 some years. JL, we've known each other for a really long time. We still keep. Matthew Stein, I met at the Miami Media Film Market when I was a committee member. He's now working for, 50 Cent. So that is how you continue your actual career, is to make sure that you bond with people, you make sure that you have friends, true friendship, not just like, oh, this guy works for so-and-so, let me just give him a call. But those relationships, long-term relationships, will always help you.
I think, yeah, I agree.
You
I
didn't
think that
embarrass me, by the way, Bill. That's a complimentary thing.
And Sandy, I agree. Sandy knows everyone. I've hung out with Sandy and she'll be like, oh, this is that person. This is that person. Oh, you don't know him. I've known him for 20 years. And I'm like, Sandy, how do you know all these people? But besides networking, I think my greatest piece of advice is don't sit around waiting for Hollywood to save you. They're not going to come save you. You have to do it on your own. And when Hollywood's going to show up? They're going to show up when you don't need them anymore. Once you're already successful, once you're already making millions in revenue, then they're going to show up and be like, hey, you want to partner together? So yeah, like I think some people think, well, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough crew, I don't have enough equipment. Man, our phones, we've shot feature films on phones. Sean Baker shot Tangerine on an iPhone like 7 back in the day. And now he's making these Oscar-winning movies. So there's no excuse. Just start doing something, and you're going to attract more crew, more investment over time, but you have to just start. Don't wait for someone to come and rescue you.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I think you guys have great points. I will third that Sandy is a great connector. I call her Ari Emanuel of South Florida. And I'll also give a plug. And I think Film Florida is an amazing place to network and meet people. So definitely renew your memberships if it's time. I'm sure John will follow up with an email.
I have to say something, and I'm not a panelist, but I'm going to chime in here. The other thing is, even when you think that you've made it, you have to network. So there are many people that I've talked to, and I literally just spoke to an Academy Award nominated filmmaker, said, I got the nomination, I got all this praise, and it goes, but I'm still struggling to get work. I go, yeah, because you still, you're at the top for this long, and then you have to go back up again. So it is a constant. You have to have the passion also, right? I think that's part of what you have to do. Passion is part of, right? You can't move further in this business. But that's it. I
Yeah,
just wanted to chime in with that because I just had that conversation with somebody.
well, yeah, the truth is there's probably about 1% of people that work in our industry that don't have to worry about the next job. I mean, realistically, everybody has to worry whether you're at our level or the next level. There's like very, very few people that really don't have to worry about the next gig, the next job, the next paycheck. So, always continuing to build those relationships is obviously great. Again, if anybody has anything else they want to jump in with, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll just keep going on some of these other questions. JL, besides traditional film and television stuff, you work on a lot of marketing campaigns. Talk a little bit about the inspiration and the process for, I mean, two that I know really well is the Amparo Experience digital campaign for Bacardi, as well as the Real Havana Club.
Yeah. So those are kind of combined together into one campaign. But and going back to your great points, guys, about networking, it really is about maintaining those relationships over the years. And even if you lose a project, don't lose the relationship, right? It's very important. And so Carlos Gutierrez is a fellow Cuban-American filmmaker and producer, had basically gotten the opportunity to develop a media campaign, and he invited me on board as an executive producer. And this was a couple years ago for the Amparo Experience. If you guys are not familiar, it was a story that was told by, we call them the V's, right? Vicky and Vanessa, amazingly talented local writers in Miami, and very much involved in the interactive theater world. It was a hugely successful show in Miami. It was selling out every night, where essentially you would go in as an audience, get a couple of shots of Havana Club, which is fun, and then they would take you through this interactive experience of the Amparo family, which was the original family that created the Havana Club rum in Cuba, and their eventual exodus to Miami after the communist government took over and they lost their company, and how they fought for so many years to get it back, eventually with the help of Bacardi. And now it's one of the biggest Bacardi brands is Havana Club. So our task was to transform that into a digital experience via Instagram. And it's still there on Instagram, the Amparo Experience. And so essentially, we were brought together to shoot these series of vignettes that were going to tell the story of the Amparo Experience on Instagram, but we shot it like an indie feature, essentially. We developed it, crewed it up, and shot it just like we would a low-budget feature film in South Florida. And we pulled it off. We were able to find great locations to double for Cuba. We used the Biltmore Hotel, which is the home of the MMFM, which is a beautiful venue. If you guys haven't seen that venue, to mimic like the old Havana club places where people would hang out and have New Year's parties and that kind of thing. We also found a great little venue in Broward that we used as well. And we just put it together, and it was great. It was such a great experience because we were able to take this live experience and show it through the screen. And Eddy was saying, it was all in the cell phone. It wasn't in movie theaters, it wasn't on television, but it was all done through this really interesting social media digital campaign where, at the end of the day, you're advertising a product for Bacardi, right? But you're also personalizing it. And I think that was important to Bacardi, right? Was to tell the personal story behind it and make it universal, right? Which I think is what all of us should be doing as filmmakers and producers in general, right? And so it was a great campaign. It got a lot of buzz when we released it. Vicky and Vanessa were fantastic to work with. Ruben Rabasa, the whole cast was just incredible. And they've all gone on to do bigger and better things. So it was just a great experience and a great way to tell a very authentic Cuban story within the larger context, and using the digital platform, to really put eyeballs on it all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what it is, the end product is, it really does come down to the experience you're creating and the story that you're telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think, just to kind of piggyback on some of the other comments in terms of just kind of advice and what sort of the next opportunities might be for us, especially as Hispanic content creators and Florida-based content creators, is, there's been a lot of talk in the trades about the end of peak television, right? So as Bill mentioned, a lot of the streamers and the studios are tightening their belts They're looking to license more now towards co-productions where they're not fronting all of the costs. Obviously, incentives play a huge part in that as well. But this idea of indie television has really started to, I think, seep into the network level. If you guys are familiar with the Duplass brothers, they just came out with this great show on Netflix called Penelope, which again was a very personal story that Mark wanted to tell about his relationship with his daughter and her addiction to social media or whatever, and kind of breaking the younger generations away from that. But he essentially self-financed the series exactly like he had done with his many indie films that had premiered at Sundance with his brother. But he did it as a series, 8 episodes. He spent, he doesn't really disclose the budget, but I would say somewhere between 300 to 500K an episode, which is more like reality show prices than it is, a scripted series. But was able to take it to Sundance just like a feature, was able to create a bidding war. He kept the rights as an IP owner, which I think is very important also for Miami and Florida filmmakers to start thinking not just in terms of production opportunities, but really developing your own content and owning that IP so that you can continue to monetize your work even after it's out there. It's super important. So he was able to create this great licensing deal with Netflix where he kept all the VOD rights and all the international rights. He's building his audience, right, which is his audience, and he now can determine whether or not he wants to shoot a second season, not Netflix or Paramount or whomever, which I think is an amazing model that we can follow because we do have some great local incentives that I think are more in tune with that budget level, that if we can find the right story and the right filmmakers to tell those stories, that could be a huge opportunity because as we leave peak television, I think we're going to be entering the golden age of the independent producer. And I think that's where Floridians in particular can really shine.
Yeah. Well, one thing to add to what JL just said, because I'm a really big fan of the Duplass brothers, is Mark Duplass wrote that script and he took it to the studios and said, hey, I want to make this. And all the studios were like, no one's going to want to watch this. Self-financed it, made it himself, put it on Netflix. And it was like #1 TV show for weeks. And you're saying went to Sundance and got all these awards. So it's what I said earlier. These studios won't come to you until you don't need them anymore. And I think he is the captain of that kind of idea of just do it yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely.
Well, it's a good segue into kind of where I want to go next, which is we've talked about, the past and kind of current. How do we continue the momentum for the truly authentic Hispanic content and the Hispanic content producers to make sure that we continue the progress that has been made? Bill, do you want to go first?
Yeah. How are you going to be able to break the Hollywood gatekeepers and them providing you the financing to tell your stories? Is you have to go directly to the consumer. That's it. You have to bypass the middle person, whether they're a distribution company that's just taking advantage of independent filmmakers. That's another subject matter. But what the actual filmmakers need to do is go after the person that's going to watch your show. That's it. That's going from your content straight to the consumer. And one of the biggest platforms available, and I hate saying this, but it's YouTube. And let me give you a perfect example of how this happens with a different content, and Latinos can do it for their content. There's a up and coming comedian called Drewski. Most of you might not even know him, but he just sold out, State Farm Arena in Atlanta. And he's putting out his own content. Now, it's a different type of content, different demographic, whole different story. He's not going to the studios and Netflix to go finance his show. What he's doing is he's going after branded Nike, what's the other one? Carl's Chicken Finger, this other company, and they're financing and co-financing their productions. Same thing with Rally Caps, okay? For example, Rally Caps was a perfect example of how an independent project can take an intellectual property, okay, and you raise the money privately, and then you go to brands. Major League Baseball sponsored the film. We have Wilson, Big League Chew, Cochlear Implant, which is a biotech company for implants for hearing aids, and they co-finance this project. So to tell these authentic stories, you gotta stop looking for Netflix and pitching them, because you know what? The door, it opens and closes, opens and closes. It's kind of like Paramount Pictures now, and Paramount is going through their turmoil. They're still kind of rehashing everything. Medical shows and detective shows. If you look at it, it's all the same. But every once in a while they go outside. Shogun, for example, a amazing series, one of the best series that I've watched this season, broke in. But think about the complexity of trying to pitch to the studio. So going back on how me as an independent filmmaker, how I would move forward is I already have my distributor. It's called YouTube, okay? And they're looking for content. And the way that you can finance your projects is by creating the IP, writing the script. You got to do the work. No one's gonna, like, I get pitched all the time. I got a great idea. That's nice. Where's your business strategy? Where's the script? Have you broken down the actual like business model and the budget, how much you're going to spend? And more importantly is, do you know who your demographic is? I'll go back to Rally Caps. Rally Caps is a family film geared towards moms, period. I know that because when we had our test screenings, the moms were crying at the end and coming to us and saying, oh my God, what an amazing movie. So that right there tells me that that's my demo and that's who you go after. Same strategy for Latinos. Now, here's the challenge with us Latinos. We like the Batman movies. We like the big, stories, that 30%. I mean, guess who the majority goes watch those films? I go to Hialeah and the little kids wearing Spider-Man t-shirt, right? We love those action kind of films. And I think it's a challenge to sometimes have our own culture and our own people support independent films in the Latin community. So I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the only way of doing it. Because again, Hollywood has its own rules and you don't know what the flavor of the month is going to be. And just getting through the door, even at our levels, I still have challenges from time to time of, getting the door open.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are great points, Bill. I just wanted to add to that because it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, is in terms of making something that's very personal yet universal, and again, not specific to the Hispanic community. I mean, you mentioned, meeting Steven Spielberg. I mean, what is E.T.? What is The Fabelmans? That was his life growing up, in this random Arizona suburban neighborhood. And he was able to universalize that with a bigger story, right? Science fiction with E.T., and then obviously something even more personal with his becoming of a filmmaker in The Fabelman. But that, I think, the kind of line of thinking that we should be having is who is going to be this Latino Spielberg and find, what was described as the angel inside the beast, right? Of the machinery of content creation. And even when I was in film school, I had read a biography of Spielberg, and going back to the mentorship point, and now I'll turn over back to John. He said, once we hit a certain level of success, if we keep taking from the well, but never put anything back, eventually the well will go dry, right? So like the African proverb, each one teach one. And I think that's also hugely important in moving forward as a community and as an industry.
Yeah. Yeah. JL, remind people where they can find more about you, MMFM, everything you're working on. Plug away.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we are on social media at Miami Film Market, MiamiMediaFilmMarket.org. We also have a new brand called CreativesMiami.com. This summer, we unveiled our inaugural Orange List. If you guys are familiar with the Hollywood Blacklist, it's essentially what our committee has thought are some of the top unproduced screenplays by Miami talent. So that PDF is visible on both creatorsmiami.com and miamimediafilmmarket.org. And go there, check out some of those log lines and support local talent. And there's a lot of Hispanic content on there as well.
Love it. Eddy?
At WEG Films. But we are on all social media as WEG Films, and we have events bi-monthly. Again, we have next week an event with the Miami Film Festival that is for filmmaker networking and conversations about producing in South Florida.
And Bill?
You can go to playworldpictures.com and just there you'll be able to sign up for a newsletter if you'd like, or you can, tag the different social media platforms that we're on. So playworldpictures.com.
Excellent. That's going to wrap up another edition of Film Florida Friday. Thanks to Eddy, Bill, and JL for being with us. And thanks to everybody that was in our audience today. Thanks to Katie Collins for helping me wrangle and prepare for Film Florida Friday each month. We're back next month with a great discussion about screenwriting, creating compelling original screenplays. Be on the lookout for that email as well as on our social media pages. As always, thanks to our Film Florida members for their continued support. If you're not a member of Film Florida, we hope you'll consider joining at filmflorida.org. Keep up with everything we're doing on our social media pages. Make sure you check out the Film Florida podcast, which is now in its 7th season, available on most major podcast outlets. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Thanks again for being here, everybody, and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, you guys. Nice seeing everyone.
As Pitbull says, Dale.
Bye. Bye.